You won't believe what is happening right now in Tanzania. Tanks rolling through the streets. Internet completely shut down. Protesters battling security forces, and the entire media is silenced. This is not a movie. This is happening today, and the world needs to see what President Samia Suluhu Hassan doesn't want you to know. Let me set the scene for you. Tanzania is holding what they are calling a presidential election. But here is the shocking truth. The two main opposition candidates are not even on the ballot. Tundu Lissu, the charismatic opposition leader who returned from exile to fight for democracy, who came in the second in the last election, is sitting in a jail cell, not convicted of any crime, mind you, but charged with treason. They have thrown him on death row under 24-hour surveillance in solitary confinement, all before any trial. And get this, John Heche, his deputy, also arrested. Luhaga Mpina, another opposition candidate, disqualified for the second time. The entire Chadema party, the main opposition, banned from the elections for allegedly missing a submission deadline. John Kitoka, the spokesperson for Chadema, said nothing that should send chills down your spine. The saying here is, Samia is running against Suluhu. She is running against herself. She is forcing people to vote for her to legitimize an illegal process, because what is going on is a coronation, not an election. Think about that for a moment. In a country of over 60 million people with 37 million registered voters, the president is essentially running unopposed. But that is not all. Wait until you see what the regime did to silence dissent. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, when she took power in March 2021 after the mysterious death of her predecessor, John Magufuli Mapombe, the world had hope. Here was Africa's second female head of state. She promised reforms, she promised change, and she promised to ease the brutal repression of Magufuli era. For a brief moment, Tanzania breathed easier. Opposition figures cautiously returned from exile. The media dared to report more freely. Human rights advocates whispered that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But those whispers were all wrong. What happened over the past 2 years has shocked human rights organizations worldwide. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the United Nations, they have all documented the same horrifying pattern. Let me give you some numbers that will make your blood run cold. The Tanganyika Law Society documented 83 cases of people going missing under mysterious circumstances as of August 9, 2024. 83 people who just vanished, and these aren't random disappearances. These are targeted attacks on opposition members, activists, journalists, and anyone who dares to speak out. On April 24, 2025, when Tundu Lissu appeared in court, police arrested dozens of his supporters outside. Many reported being harassed, beaten, and subjected to treatment that amounts to torture. And then, get these, abandoned in the remote forest of over 40 kilometers from the city center, left to find their way home, traumatized, injured, and terrified. When prominent Kenyan lawyers and human rights campaigners, including former Chief Justice Willy Mutunga and former Justice Minister Martha Karua, tried to attend Lissu's trial, they were deported, kicked out of the country. The message was clear: we do not want witnesses, we do not want oversight, we do not want the world to see what we are doing. But you haven't heard the most shocking part of this yet. Now, here is where things get truly sinister. Early Wednesday morning of October 29th, as polling stations opened across Tanzania, something unprecedented happened. The internet just stopped. NetBlocks, the global internet monitoring organization, confirmed it. Live network data shows a nationwide disruption to internet connectivity in Tanzania on the election day, corroborating reports of a digital blackout. At 12:30 p.m., national internet traffic plunged to nearly 90% below normal levels. Social media platforms completely unreachable without VPNs. Mobile data dead. Even Instagram Live and TikTok Live, which had been partially accessible before shutdown on October 6th. Three journalists speaking from Dar es Salaam and Arusha reported that social media platforms were completely unreachable without virtual private networks, but here is the kicker. The Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority, the TCRA, issued warning to citizens, threatening fines and prosecution for using VPNs. They shut down the internet and they threatened to arrest people who tried to get around the shutdowns, and it's like cutting off someone's oxygen and then charging them for trying to breathe. Journalists and election observers in Dar es Salaam, Arusha and Mwanza couldn't upload videos or photos from polling stations. The world was being deliberately kept in the dark, and this wasn't the first time. During the 2020 elections under Magufuli, Tanzania implemented similar shutdowns. Back then, they blocked Twitter, WhatsApp, Facebook and Instagram. They suspended bulk SMS services. They essentially cut the country off from the digital world. But why? Why go to such extreme lengths? Because the regime knew that what was coming. They knew that Generation Z, Tanzania's young people inspired by successful youth movements in Kenya, Uganda and across Africa, were planning something big, and they were right to be terrified. The Gen Z in Tanzania are done being silent, they are done watching their democracy crumble, and they are done seeing their leaders disappear. They are done living in fear. In the weeks leading up to the election, young protesters have joined the Chadema in chanting a powerful war cry: no reforms, no elections. They were not just asking for change, they were demanding for it. And on election day, despite the military presence, despite the tanks stationed around Dar es Salaam, despite the threats and despite the fear, they have taken over the streets. Hundreds of protesters in Dar es Salaam marched singing, "We want our country back." Think about the courage that this takes. Knowing what happened to Kibao, knowing about the disappearances and knowing about the torture, and still showing up. Reports have been flooding in from across the country. Dar es Salaam, the western border town of Sirare, chaos erupting as young people refuse to be silenced. One young voter, Noel Johnson, captured the sentiment perfectly. The government needs to protect our constitutional rights, especially the rights to go for demonstrations, because we are not satisfied by the ongoing electoral processes. Another resident, that is Joshua Gerald, speaking anonymously out of fear for his safety, said, "Peace must prevail for the election to run smoothly, because without peace there cannot be chaos or fear, and people may fail to exercise their democratic rights." As the sun rose on October 29th, the government declared it a public holiday, so people could vote and not go to work. But when dawn broke, polling stations across the country stood eerily empty. Voters' turnout was dramatically low. In Tanzania's biggest city, there were few voters at polling stations. Why? Because of fear. Protests have been explicitly banned. The government and police have repeated threats that protests will not be tolerated. They stationed tanks around Dar es Salaam. Think about the imagery. Regional human rights groups including the Kenyan Human Rights Commission and the Pan-African Progressive Leaders Network, Vocal Africa and Power 254, released a scathing statement calling the election a sham. They said the political situation in Tanzania, where the opposition has been under state attack, represents a total collapse of democratic principles within the East African community. There will be no genuine elections in Tanzania. The ruling regime has dismantled all mechanisms that would have guaranteed a free and fair voting. Even more disturbing, reports have emerged of truckloads of stuffed ballot boxes being intercepted en route to voting sites. Government employees were allegedly threatened with firing if they did not cast a ballot. And this isn't democracy, this is dictatorship wearing a democratic mask. The ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, the CCM, has been in power for 64 years. A version of this same party has controlled Tanzania since independence from Britain in 1961. Think about what this means for young people. If you are in Generation Z, if you are under 25 years old, your parents never knew a different government. Your grandparents barely knew a different government, and this all you have ever known. And yet, despite the risks, despite the fear, and despite everything, Tanzania's youth are saying enough is enough, but there is something more, even more sinister, happening behind the scenes that you need to know about. Despite everything, despite the fear and despite the violence, organizations like Access Now and the Keep It On coalition, representing over 345 organizations from 106 countries, have been relentless in their pressure. They have issued public appeals to President Hassan. We appeal to you to publicly commit to ensuring that the people in the Republic of Tanzania have unfettered access to the internet, digital platforms, and all other communication channels throughout the elections. Collaborations on international ICT policy for East Africa and Southern Africa, CIPESA, has been equally vocal. Tanzania's blockage of X not only stifles important public opinions, but also promotes self-censorship despite Tanzania's several national, regional, and international commitments to protect and promote freedom of expression. They are citing Tanzania's own constitutional Article 18 guarantees freedom of expression, the Access of Information Act of 2016, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Tanzania has signed these segments and agreements. They have made these commitments and they are violating every single one of them. So let's recap this shocking story. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who came to power promising reform, has instead overseen a dramatic increase in repression, enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrest, and the list goes on. But Tanzania's Generation Z isn't backing down. Despite the risks, despite the fear, everything, they are fighting for democracy. The question now is, will the world stand with them, or will we let the Tanzanian democracy die in the darkness of an internet shutdown? This is not just a Tanzania story, this is our story, and this is the story of whether democracy matters, whether human rights matter, whether we matter. If this story made you angry, if it shocked you, or if it moved you, share it. Don't let this be buried. Don't let the internet shutdown succeed in its goal of keeping the world in the dark. Tanzania's Generation Z, fighting for their future. The least we can do is to make sure that the world is watching, because in the end, that's what authoritarianism fears most: witnesses. If you want to stay updated on this developing situation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video widely and with everyone you know. Let's make sure that Tanzania's story is heard.